good afternoon and welcome to what is the fourth instalment of our Communications Lunch and Learn series. My name's Matt and I head up the contract team here at VMA Group. And I'm delighted to be joined by the hugely experienced and all-round good egg, Nadine Dixon, as she shares her journey into the wonderful world of contracting. This is a session of particular interest to me as I work in contract recruitment and have done for the last 8 years at VMA Group. So I'm really excited to hear the kind of tips and wisdom that Nadine's able to share with the comms community. Just a very quick kind of intro, recap as to who we are and why we run these sessions before I'll shortly hand over to Nadine. So VMA Group is a corporate communications and marketing recruitment company based here in the UK, but recruiting globally. We have around 25 to 30 consultants covering permanent and contract positions. But as well as recruitment, we also like to share best practice with the industry, whether that be through reports. We actually launched our latest one yesterday, internal communications reports, or events such as this one, really, so we can share best practice and facilitate that platform where communications professionals can hopefully learn new skills and grow their careers. So far this year, we have hosted sessions. So we host them monthly. So January, February, March, we hosted sessions on broad change communications, merger and acquisition, comms, as well as crisis communications as well. So if you weren't able to join any of those sessions, then do feel free to just search VMA Group into YouTube, but all the recordings are on there if any of those topics are of interest. With regards to order of play today, I'll shortly hand over to Nadine, where she'll run through her presentation for around 20 minutes or so. If you do have any questions for Nadine, just pop them in the Q&A box. Or for myself around the contract market, of course, you're more than welcome to ask me, but I know that Nadine is the star of the show, to be honest, today. So just pop them in the Q&A box and then we can run through them at the end. So as I say, just a very quick intro for me. I'm conscious that some of you would have been on our other webinars and probably have heard enough from me over the last few months. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Nadine Dixon.
Thank you very much, Matt. And really, really excited to be here. And hello, everybody. I am Nadine Dixon, as Matt said. I'm a senior change communications professional. And I'm here today to talk to you about how you can succeed also as an interim communicator. So I thought I'd start off by telling you a little bit about me and how I came into being in interim communications. So I have 20 years of communications experience. Probably one of those people that I kind of call unique because what I studied at university many years ago, 20 years ago actually, is actually now what I'm doing as a career. People often say to me, so why communications? What took you into that role? So even dating back to sort of GCSEs, A levels many moons ago, I must admit I always kind of looked for the subjects which had the least maths content because it's not my strongest subject. So that's how I came to be in Marcoms. And ever since then, I've just loved it, really passionate about it. I like to be innovative in my approach, and I just like talking about it as well all the time. So if we do get talking, then excuse me if I do keep, get into conversations about everything comms. So in terms of my interim work, so I've been an interim communicator for 10 years, and I'm often asked how and why. So my role, my permanent role, was made redundant 10 years ago, and that was a catalyst for why I then started to do interim communications roles. So that was 10 years ago. Since then, I've actually had 8 roles. So yeah, in 10 years, 8 roles. So pretty amazing. And I'll go on to explain a bit more about some of those roles that I have had in that period. So I've worked with a diverse range of organisations and led the communications for very, very broad projects. So business and technology transformations, this is a very broad area. So from process redesigns, rebrands, technology implementations, covering that whole spectrum of working with many different teams. So from HR to tech, that collaboration with operations. And my role as the change comms lead quite often in these projects. Mergers and acquisitions, this is a really huge one. I mean, organisations are changing, competitive environments are shifting, and therefore lots of organisations are having to, go down the M&A route. So in terms of mergers and acquisitions, that could be from, discrete business units, the acquisition of one single area that a business wants to really excel in, through to, the merger of an entire business organization. And for me, these are the sort of projects where you get to see the full breadth of a company. You're going to see from the HR element, from the tech, from the operations. And yeah, they're really quite exciting. And they tend to be huge projects, lots of people working on them. Regulatory reforms. I've been really fortunate. I went through a period where I went from one reg project, as they call them, to another. So I did about 4 in a row, and I became almost known as this sort of reg reform queen. Just fortunate, and it happened to be that I was just working on those. GDPR, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. And if, like me, you work in financial services, and that's the other thing, lots of acronyms when you work on reg reform projects. So if you do work in financial services, you probably know MiFID II, that's the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive. I led the communications for that at the FCA, actually. Another one that I worked on, again, if you're in the financial services, senior managers and certification regime. So that's more around the culture of an organization, making sure that, we're all doing what we're supposed to do. And then the last one that I worked on was LIBOR transition. I would say these projects are really, really intricate. Regulation, the legal element of it is really, really intricate. But again, really cultural integration. Now, I wouldn't say that I've been gone into a role and they've said, oh, we want you to work on our cultural integration. I would say that this is the piece that underpins all of the projects that I've worked on. So if you think about a merger and an acquisition, the cultural integration is going to be key to that. It's underpinning everything that happens as part of that. The business and technology transformation, okay, it might just be a 365 upgrade, but that's a culture shift. People are having to work different when that new technology does come in. So yes, being an interim communicator means that I've been able to work on a very, very broad spectrum of projects. So you're probably thinking, what is your role, Nadine, when you go into these decks? My role, I've been appointed as a communications expert, and that's what I am with 20 years experience. I am an expert in the communications, and also I've been doing interim work for 10 years, and that essentially the company is hiring you for. They are hiring us for our communications expertise. So when I get into an organization, it's really important for me to get to know the organization. So that's the people, the products, the services, even the environment. You may have gone from working in one part of the city to another part of the city. Environment, to know the organization and its stakeholders. Stakeholders, that key part, the key stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders as communicators, I'm not speaking about stakeholders in terms of the audience messaging. I'm talking about your decision makers in the organization. Who's the chief financial officer? Who are some of those sponsors of the projects that you're working on? For me, it's really, really important to get to know the organization and how it operates, but also the key stakeholders. Once you've got that sort of key foundation, the organization, the key stakeholders, that's when you really get into the heart of it, and when you're able to bring out what's best about what we do as community comms planning. So from that very early stage, understanding who the audience are, understanding the messages that you want to get across, and the channels that you're going to use. There's so many different channels, organization to another, they vary. So you can go in a large organization and they have every single channel available to you, which is great. And that's where you get that depth of experience. So you've gone potentially from working at a smaller company that maybe has 2 or 3 channels, very embryonic. And then you go to a very large company and they have everything. And that's where your skill set is up. So for me, that's, another enjoyable piece of being So just wanted to share some of the organizations that I've worked with. So as you can see, it's predominantly financial services, and that's where most of my experience has come from. But I started my first ever interim role was at the Mayor of London. Funnily enough, it was when Boris Johnson was our London Mayor at City Hall. So that was a great experience. I think Boris is always very a Marmite type of character, isn't he, for some people? And the reason I went for the role at the Mayor of London, it was just on the job board. I just recently come out of my 10, I think it's 9 or 10-year permanent role in financial services. And I said, I'm going to challenge myself. I know my skill set, much like you do. We know our skills in communications are transferable. And I said, I'm going to challenge myself and see. Mayor of London, this is a public sector role. I'd never worked in the public sector up to that point. And I thought, right, going to give it a go. Saw the job, sent my CV off, and I was interviewed and was successful. And at that time, I worked within comms role, but within the housing team at City Hall, which is a great building to work in. So recommend working there to anybody who see a role come up there. But again, it was for me, it was about just, testing myself. Are my skills transferable? Which deep down I knew they were. And I was given that opportunity to. Since then, worked from some really large organizations, some big brands, and some really, really interesting projects, as I mentioned earlier. So this factor, I think Simon calls it the X factor, but I call this the success factor. So the success factor to me is, what's really going to set you up to do well as an interim communicator. And there are a couple of points which I think are key. And I certainly think that they have stood me in good stead in terms of the role that I've had. So the stuff, you are being chosen as a communicator because it's important that you remember that and have that confidence with that. You are coming into an organization and a project for your communications expertise, and you will be expected to really know the ins and outs of your expertise, so whether that is within internal communications, external communications, or within communications. You are going to be the best of that people come.
Hi,
For
Nadine.
me,
I just wanted to jump in. We're having a few issues with regards to the connection and sound quality. I don't know if it'd be a quick fix or not. That's why I wasn't sure to mention it in the first instance. But yeah, it's just maybe there might be a few kind of connection or Wi-Fi issues your end. Just had another comment come through as well on the
oh
chat.
no,
I don't know. We can try and move forward. Maybe we try and continue at some point without your camera. I don't know if that will help, but we can try and power through. But yeah, there's
yeah.
just a few issues. Just wanted to mention.
Okay, let me just try it with this. I'll stop the video for a couple of seconds.
Maybe try that.
Sorry
Yeah,
about that. Let's see. So hopefully you can still hear me. Hopefully the video has helped somewhat. So resilience. So resilience for me, you're going to be coming into new environments, meeting new people, new personalities, and sometimes you really have to make sure that you're equipped for that, moving in and out of different organizations. Influencer. Hopefully that has helped on the quality map. Please do let me know.
It has, yeah.
Perfect. Sorry that you can't see me, everyone, but I'm still going to power through. That's part of the resilience. So influencer, when I talk about influencer, I'm not talking about an Instagram influencer here. I am talking about your influence in the organization. So there are going to be times when, some of your views and opinion are going to be unpopular. You may go into an organization that is just mandated that everyone returns to the office for 5 days, when actually your research that you may have done suggests that we have been productive by coming in 2 or 3 days. And putting your business case forward and having that influence with major stakeholders is going to be really important. So that's about influencer skills. That's what I'm referring to. Stakeholder management is so important. Understand making the firm, but understand what their expectations are. If, like me, you're a change communicator and you're working on a project, understand who your sponsors are. What is it that they're looking for? How can you set yourself up for success in that organization, and understand what their requirements are? that's about having meetings with them to understand, what does good look like for them, what works for them, what hasn't worked, just really understanding who the key stakeholders in an organization are. This, because you could be going into a role that is 3 months long or 6 months long, and you are going to be expected to hit the ground running. You could be covering for short term, it could be term 12 months. But when you come in, you are really going to be expected to know your staff and hit the ground running. So the good news, what makes me smile in all of this? So skill set. I touched on a bit earlier when I was going through this. I certainly believe in the 10 years that I've been doing this, that my skill set has gone tenfold almost, from if I was still in my permanent role. The breadth of organizations that I've worked with and the depth of projects also has really allowed me to really enhance my skill set, from communication strategy planning, even well, I mentioned it earlier, organizations are so different in terms of their communications and their channels that they have, that just by the very nature of moving from one organization to another, you're getting that additional expertise. Sorry that you can't, you see that I'm going through this, makes me smile, the flexibility. So there are going to be periods, and sometimes there may be, where in between roles, you may have a week off, a month. And for me, that's about having that downtime with my family, and additional time. So yeah, that really makes me smile. So that flexibility. New colleagues and friends. 8 different roles. So that's 8 different sets of colleagues that I now have as friends. And just building up your network is so, so important. And yeah, another point that makes me smile is having all these new colleagues and friends. Range of projects. Yes. I am so, so happy that I've been able to work on this range of projects that I spoke about earlier. And again, Communicator, it's so important for me as it's part of that enhanced skill set, which I also mentioned, having that diverse range of projects. So again, another point which makes me smile. Companies to explore. From the Mayor of London, I'm working with Boris Johnson. My goodness, isn't that something great? I work in financial services. I've worked for the Financial Conduct Authority. That's a huge accolade. To work for the regulator who regulates the industry in which you function in. Barclays and Schroders, some hard lifters in the in that financial services sector. So it's about new companies to explore, new ways of working, new people, as I mentioned. So again, another great area, if you're a change communicator and working in interim, is that you get to explore these new companies. And finally, financial well-being. For me, as an interim communicator, I had to earn slightly more than if I was in a comparable permanent role. So for me, that sort of financial well-being is really important. And again, makes me smile. So you are here because I'm thinking that this is something that you are considering, being an interim communicator. So there were a couple of things I think that you should ask yourself before going on this journey. Then you need to ask yourself, are you comfortable, with constant change? Because being a communicator, for me personally, my longest contract has been about 2 years, and my shortest is 6 months. That is a period of constant change for someone potentially who's in a permanent role, has been in their last role for the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years. So ask yourself, am I comfortable with potentially going through periods of change? Did you have that flexibility that makes me smile, makes me happy? And if I had my camera on, you'd be able to see that. There's also that period of, say, your contract's ending, or you've been successful, but it's ending in July. You don't know when your next role is going to come about. So the job insecurity, you really need to ask yourself, are you comfortable with that? aligned with that also is the financial insecurity. So, yes, I have had breaks between roles, but it also means that there's that financial insecurity. And, honestly, when I do work, I plan so that if I do have those breaks, I am able to be financially secure. But again, are you going to be comfortable if you're not working for a month, 2 months, or even longer? I mean, these are the realities, and I want to be completely honest with you. It's great and I love it, but these are the additional points that you really have to ask yourself also. So, securing your next role. Is a VMA. I'm going to tell you a story. I use agencies, and that's why I've put them there as in terms of finding your. So when I got my current role, the way that it happened was I was on LinkedIn, looking through job boards, and I saw a notification come up, and it said that was Matt's birthday, and I the same birthday month. And I wouldn't normally send somebody, and I haven't ever and didn't before send anyone a sort of happy birthday message on LinkedIn, really. And I thought, oh, actually, he's, same birth month as me. I'll send him a message. So I sent him a message saying, happy birthday, have a great day. And I was also looking for a new role. So at the bottom, I said, I'm actually looking for another role. Please do, let me know. And so came back a day or so later and said, actually, my colleague is working on a role. So, potentially speak to her if you could be a good fit, take your CV forward. And I did. Proactively, I contacted the consultant that he mentioned, sent my CV over, then became part of the shortlisting process and went through the interview, and I was actually successful. So the reason I tell you that is that you really have to be proactive if you're going to be an interim communicator. You've got to think creatively, of also getting that next role. Your
And you've got to wish
network
me
is
a
your
happy
network.
birthday. That also helps.
Yeah, it's July. If anybody wants to know out there, me and Matt share the same birth month, so you can wish us both happy birthday in July. So your network is your net worth, and I really stand on this. It's really, really important if you're an interim working in interim roles that you don't wait until the end of your contract comes before you're looking for your next one. You should be attending events. You should be expanding your network. You should be proactive on LinkedIn, speaking to your friends, your family. You just don't know where the next role is going to come from. So it's really important to make sure that you're working with your network on that. Job boards. So when I think of all the 8 roles that I've had, across this free split of recruitment agents, my network and job boards, it's equally split. So it's quite interesting. But I'm sure you want to know, I use LinkedIn, I use Indeed. I actually once signed up for, I think they're called Total Jobs. I signed up for them on like a Monday. I'd never really used them prior to that. And by the Friday, a role had come up actually at Schroders on that site, and I applied and I was successful. So yeah, really encourage you to use all of these efforts that I've said, so recruit boards, and use them collectively so that when you're coming out of your interim role, that you successfully move on to the next one. You want to have that seamless transition. I just thought I'd just put this in. I love this photo. For me, it's about, when I talk about no the interim communicator, and you staff, be confident in that. And I believe, you are on, because where you're going to be an interim communicator, and therefore you do know your stuff. And for me, fortune favors the bold. So it's about, being courageous and taking that next step if this is what you want to do. So a bit of a recap through everything that I've gone through just now. So the main point is identify your strengths. What are the bits that you really like in your role? Because for me, it's about enjoying what you do. I'm really passionate about communications and enjoy it because I love my job. I love the work that I do. So I really calling you to identify your strengths. What are the parts of your role as an internal communicator or as a change communicator or external communicator that you really enjoy? Those are the that really set you apart from others. I spoke about it, and I still keep banging that drum of networking, building relationships, because you just don't know where that next role is going to come from. It could be within your network, and just extending that network, events, job boards, proactively being on LinkedIn as well, and other speaking to your recruitment agents. Don't just speak to them when you need a role. No, you should be having a relationship with them in terms of checking in. I often ask recruitment agents, what's the market like? Even when I'm in a role, I think it's quite interesting to know, is it a challenging environment? Is there more I could do? Send them my CV sometimes, even though I've been in, interim communicator for 10 years. It's always good for someone to advise, is my CV keeping those relationships going in terms of with your network? And I used to be like many years. So for me, it's about enjoying what you do. And I think it's really, really important that you do. So once you get that role, embrace it, enjoy every moment, and enjoy the opportunity as well. To hand over to questions and answers, questions from everyone. I'll see if my video is okay to be back on.
You're back in
Please
the
let me
room.
know.
Nadine, I'm really sorry to have to ask you to turn your video off midway through. But yeah, it was challenging at times to hear you. But on the whole, really great tips in there, and we can definitely hear 99% of what you were saying. And especially, from my side, I would just reiterate the connection, the building your network. Of course, that's important when you're looking for a permanent role. But with regards to the contract search, again, I was just at an event yesterday where just highlighted the importance of having that network, whether it's previous colleagues that you've worked with or other recruitment consultancies, and just increasing those opportunities as much as you can, particularly in the challenging markets that we find ourselves in sometimes, like in the current time at the current state of play. So yes, a few questions have come through for you, Nadine. So I'll just run through those with you now. So a question from Nikki. I guess Julie, I guess for me and you actually on this one, Nadine. So, in your experience, are clients more or less open to candidates from outside their sector from interim roles? Obviously, Nadine, you've had a lot of experience in financial services, but how have you found it? Going in, applying or interviewing for roles outside of that sector.
I certainly have applied for roles outside of my sector. I think it definitely depends on who the client is or the organisation. I think there are some that are more open. I work with people from financial services. So I think, yes, it's possible. Is it trickier? Yes, I think it is. I think some organisations like to play it a little bit safer and go with somebody who has that expertise already in that industry. But is it impossible? No, it isn't. So I definitely think it's worth a try.
I agree, and I think there are definitely some sectors that are a little bit more close-minded, I guess, with regards to wanting that same sector experience. Lots of times, maybe a little more corporate FS or legal or something like that. But we're seeing more often, really, it's about the project expertise and change experience that you do have. For example, Nadine was talking about being the reg change queen, which I didn't know. Nadine, that was a nickname of yours, but maybe we'll go with that moving forward. But if you've worked in regulatory change before, obviously more linked to financial services or whatever it may be, then that would help you secure something else in that same kind of field. If you've worked on an M&A before, but it's in a totally different sector, and there's another M&A change program comes up, then you may be more likely to achieve that, to secure that role, than you would be with someone with sector experience. So yeah, on the whole, the sector experience isn't as key from my perspective. It's more about the change expertise. A question here from Dana, which I find really interesting, so thank you for this one, Dana. As an interim change communications consultant myself, I've seen the nature of my role evolve into a more strategic, trusted advisor and sort of coach type of role, where I educate and share my expertise with leaders and colleagues, almost to the point where I'm no longer needed. What is your view on the evolution of the role, and what new skills do you think will be in demand?
I certainly think when you come into a role, you are, I mean, take a step back. Comms is and should be seen as a strategic function. We are not there just to do the tactical element of it. So certainly, I think if it's evolving into that, then that is great. When I go into a role, I certainly see myself in a strategic function. I also see myself as, you know, that giving counsel to senior stakeholders. So in terms of the skill set of the future, I think, yes, if it's going in the strategic direction, and that's certainly good. I think the tech space and around com, that's certainly evolving in the way that we do things. What we did 5 years ago has certainly evolved now, where technology plays a lot more of a greater role. We're talking about AI. I'm still exploring that. I haven't done an AI post, although I have seen a few out there. I think kind of thinking, oh, is AI going to take over my job? I don't think so. Some of the posts that I've seen will be able to add. It's just from a very basic writing level, and we are going to know those organisations. We're going to know those stakeholders. So AI, I don't think will take our roles, but certainly working alongside it. So a couple of things there. Yes, moving into a strategic function. Should be, and also the sort of technological element. I think that's where we're heading towards more.
Thank you, Nadine. Got a question here from Sarah. I assume once you have a few projects under your belt, it gets easier to attract new opportunities. I guess linking to that, the network and experience points that you mentioned. But how easy or hard did you find it to secure your first interim role?
So my first interim role was at the Mayor of London, and that was a fixed term contract role. So that's another area also, to explain about the different types of roles. So you've got that fixed term contract role where you're essentially an employee of the organisation. I've also worked within my limited company, and I've also done day rate. So I think it's about applying. I think for me, that was taking that step, being bold and applying to the role. Is it easier or harder than securing a permanent role? I think equally they're the same. I think it's about applying and taking that step.
I agree from a recruitment perspective. I mean, it can help, of course, if you have got that contracting experience, particularly if a hiring manager is looking for that kind of seasoned interim who's got who's used to working on change projects. But it's also it's if you haven't got that, it's trying to find that angle. If you've only had a permanent career, it's just trying to emphasize the change and transformation, the adaptability within those permanent roles that you can apply to the change project. So I would advise probably structuring your CV slightly differently, and bringing out those points with regards to that change and transformation, as opposed to how you would maybe talk about it in a kind of standard requirements and responsibilities and achievements as you would maybe in a typical perm CV. So yeah, really great questions so far. So thank you. They're coming through thick and fast. Question from Jay. Hi Jay, good to see you, or good to hear from you. Have you been able to avoid getting sucked into non-priority comms and the send this out vortex in your contracts, and more kind of business as usual?
Yes. Interim, and certainly in my world, in the change communication, tends to be for a defined project. And they BAU staff already within the wider team, and so therefore those sort of BAU staff will continue with the BAU work, and I come in and do the change element. Also, I don't always my role isn't always aligned to the comms team, so sometimes I'm working in a project environment, and if I am the only comms person, and therefore my role is just focused element. So the answer is yes, I have been able to just focus on the job at hand.
Nadine, I hate to do this again, but you are cutting off a little bit. I don't know if the video cancelling the video may help. We have a few more questions. If you may be able to try it just to try and increase that connectivity. A question here: are interim roles mostly in the financial sector? I've quickly answered that one. I know Nadine's here to talk about her expertise in change comms, but from a recruitment perspective, I'm dealing with lots of job briefs sort of day in, day out. And I mean, the majority, financial services takes up a large percentage of comms roles. It's around 25% within financial services and professional services, according to our latest survey. And that's across perm and contract, but it's not specifically linked to the contract market. So we do definitely place contractors in all sectors across the board, even public sector, as Nadine said, her first contract was in the public sector. We've placed contractors in all sorts, so it's not necessarily linked to FS. Beverly has asked the question, fellow Cancerian, as she mentioned. Nadine, do you have any project kickoff or introduction to workforce tips to overcome the problem of staff resistance to change or reluctance to get involved, or the feeling of being threatened?
So for me, in terms of change, I think as humans, we are reluctant to go through that sort of change, and that's understandable. For me, the key part is keeping people informed and engaged. You'll notice as soon as you start to give people that information about what's happening with the change, they become more accepting of it and come along with you on the journey. So for me, the tip is at the outset, the transparency and the honesty around what the change is, letting them know when it will happen, and keeping them informed as well. So yeah, for me, that's some of my key tips around that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nadine. Question here from Caroline. Nadine, do you have any practical tips on how you balance getting to know an organisation and hitting the ground running?
Oh, that is a great question, actually. So my tips around that is taking lots of notes, if I'm honest. And when I get in there, getting to know the organisation and keeping it fast-paced, meeting people and meeting the stakeholders, I think getting that balance right, that can help you to really get to know the organisation, but also being really realistic with whoever your line manager is at the time. There should be an element of getting, on day one, they're not going to say to you, deliver this. But I think if you're clear about, what that delivery is, when they're expecting the strategy, the planning to take place, outlining that timeline, that can be really, really important. I think it's about managing people's expectations. So that's the sort of the key part for me.
Brilliant, thank you, Nadine. So I'm just trying to collate all of the questions. We've got lots coming through now. Tony here from Berlin. Hi, Tony. Any tips for online networking? Obviously based abroad, but a lot of his work is in the UK with English-speaking companies. Have you had any experience of that at all, Nadine?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I haven't, but I think if I thought about it, there are a lot of events. I mean, we are at one now or online. So I often, when I've been to online events, connect with some of the speakers afterwards, asking questions. We're all getting to know each other here, hopefully. So yeah, I think, yes, in person is going to be a lot easier. But certainly I don't like to think that you're kind of hindered with online. I think there are so many more online events now that we're all used to engaging with each other online.
Yeah, I agree. It's just trying to find them, isn't it? Whether it's recruitment companies or agencies, or pick them up through your network. I know that during COVID there was lots of more webinar based or online based networking, but I think that there should be local networks, particularly in a city like Berlin, like you would have in London. There should be local kind of comms groups, networks. I think it'd be probably more tricky for the more remote, smaller kind of towns and cities. But yeah, hopefully there's some good bits in Berlin there for you. So Nicola asks, how valuable do you think having your own website is for raising your profile and getting noticed?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think it's worth doing if that's something you want to explore. I personally don't have one, but I do know of some interim consultants that do. So I don't think it can hinder, it can only be positive. I think in terms of all the things I spoke about, your network, recruitment agents, job boards, this is an additional. So thank you for that question. I think it's really great. Yes, I think it's worth doing if you're able to.
Yeah, no, I'd just say on that point, it's just working out the time management, and if it's how long that's going to take you, the amount of time you're going to put into it, and the likely results and ROI on that. I mean, if you are, having worked in the field for 8 years and having placed a fair few hundred people into comms contracts, I from my experience, having that website wouldn't have been the impact or the game changer. But it may be if you're, apply for roles directly and you can flag it to the client, or it might help get your name out there from that sense. But if you go working for a recruitment agency, it's normally the CV, LinkedIn profile. But yeah, as Nadine said, it can't have any detriment, but it's just the time that you want to put into it, really. Um, Angela asks, you've done so well in navigating the changes in all of your roles. What um, would be your ideal role going forward with all of your experience over the last 10 years across different projects?
Oh, I don't know if that's referring to the project or the sort of role. Certainly, it would set. If I was thinking of projects, I like the big ones. So where I spoke about business and technology transformation, they're really exciting. In terms of role, I see myself in the future as that sort of head of transformation communications in an organisation. So role, something broad where I can really get my teeth into and have that breadth of change across the entire organization. And then for the actual title, if we were taking it down to that level, it would be certainly heading up change and transformation in an organization.
Awesome. I guess now you've got so much different experience. You can apply that to, you can pick and choose now, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
hopefully, Matt.
Uh, Lots more to get through. Jessica has asked, I think, a really key question, which a lot of people would like to know. So, can you give us an insight into the length of time between your contracts? What's been your largest gap and also your smallest? And have you found that the additional financial compensation as an interim consultant helps manage those times when there are longer gaps?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Thank you very much for sending that one in. So shortest, probably a month, so 4 weeks, and longest has been a year. And the reason for that longer period was during COVID. So I like to think we won't see a time like that again. So the longest, and in terms of the financial planning, I was able to manage myself during that year period because, as I said, interim work is really about financial planning and making sure that when you have those down periods that you're able to have that buffer in place.
That's a really great question, Jessica. And there's, big range there, isn't there, really? So, yeah, it's good insight. Nicola has asked, do you go into roles on a fixed term contract basis, or are you self-employed, or do you work for an umbrella company? I think you touched on that a little bit. You've kind of done all of the above. Is that right? You've done FTC, you've done umbrella, and you've done limited.
Yes, I have. I had a limited company, so I worked for my limited company. I've also done fixed term contract roles and also day rate. Probably done more day rate if I look at all of my roles than anything else. So done the full spectrum, but day rate is where I've had most experience.
Thank you, Nadine. A question from Dana for myself, with regards to day rates. So large organisations are cutting costs quite drastically. Have you noticed this being reflected in market rates, or are they still willing to pay good rates for worthwhile candidates? With regards to that last point, are our clients still willing to pay good rates for worthwhile candidates? Absolutely. Um, uh, we can share the results, or we'll post the results of our internal communication survey online this month, and it does show the kind of day rates that you should expect there. I think that um, I can't remember if the stat was 2/3 or 3/4. I'm pretty sure it's 3/4 of internal and change communications professionals earning a day rate of over £500. The top end around, 1,000, £1,200 a day. We'd probably see the average, for a change communications lead, on those kind of transformation projects, around that kind of 750 level. I wouldn't say it's significantly increased since I started recruiting, 8 years ago. But I wouldn't say it's decreased based on the organisations cutting costs. So hopefully that answers your question there. Question here from Jessica: are interim roles mainly full-time, or do you see part-time roles? I could quickly answer that one as well. The majority would be full-time. Sometimes clients do come to us with a full-time brief, and then we are able to share a candidate who maybe wants a little bit more work-life balance and on a 4-day-a-week basis. So quite a lot of contractors that we place do work on 4-day-week contracts, but it is quite rare to do 1, 2, or 3 days actually. There's not as many out there on that basis, but as I say, 4 days is fairly common. We did launch a flexible working survey last year, and it did show that contractors do actually get more flexible working on average than permanent employees. Um, and the main reason that, again on our recent survey, that contractors, the main motivation for people to go into contracting is based on the work-life balance and the flexibility that they maybe are unable to get in a permanent role. The main reason being that if you are going to be working on a global transformation program in a global team, that there's not maybe as much use going into an office environment when the team is dispersed in different kind of locations. So you're not sitting in that central comms team. I've gone on to a different topic there, but in answer to your question, mainly full-time or 4 days a week. Nola asks, is it worthwhile getting qualifications in change management? I can definitely have my view on that, but Nadine, as the expert, what do you think on that?
I don't have change management qualification, so PROSCI, but I sit within change communications rather than change management. I think, I meet a lot of business change managers and they tend to have that role. I think from my personal experience, in terms of change communications, yes, it'd be helpful. I think any communication, it's always, any qualification is always really helpful. It's about professional development, but I haven't felt like I've needed it.
Well, yeah, a proof's in the pudding there for Nadine, kind of back-to-back contracts other than that stint during COVID and without a change management qualification. I do feel like in some cases it can be beneficial. Particularly if you are going to be reporting to a transformation director, and they may like someone if they've got certain, Prince 2 or ProSci or whatever it may be, but more often than not, it's not really a requirement, but it can only work in your favour if you do have one, would be my opinion on that. Jerry asks a question about getting noticed by recruiters, and so the question is how best to get recruiters to contact you proactively, maybe via LinkedIn, Headhunt, or wherever that may be. So other than the example you've given of wishing them happy birthday, anything else you can share on that, Nadine, and I can again have my opinion on that as well.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it about keeping those relationships. So having recruiters that you speak to and keeping in contact with them, not just keeping in contact with them when your role is, finished or expired. Checking in, finding out how the market's going, letting them know in 2 months' time your contract, is potentially finishing. Just always building those relationships with those That's similar to you, Matt. What would you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that point, and I'd say, Jerry, we've been in touch over the years, and Jerry secured some, fantastic contracts with some big global firms. So has got incredible experience, and you'd think maybe that you'd be approached, frequently. I think it's just the state of the market that we're currently in maybe hasn't been receiving the approaches that you would typically be receiving, and it's just about volume at the moment. The job flow isn't quite there, and there are quite a few candidates in the market. So just doing what you can to stand out, I think, and even if it is just a regular check-in every now and then, or just trying to get in front of people, making sure you are on the radar of various different recruiters. Obviously with LinkedIn, you put LinkedIn on in brackets there on your questions, so you can raise your profile on there. With regards to what Nadine's doing, it's speaking here or talking at CRPR events, or even just having an open to work banner or whatever it may be. Just improving your profile in that response. But yeah, it's definitely challenging at the moment. But check-ins every now and then just to kind of refresh people's memory, like Nadine did with me, is really, really helpful. So Susie asked a question, any advice on how to target regional interim roles, as almost everything I see is based in London? So I can touch on that, and also see Nadine's view. That's a good point. The majority of roles will be in London for sure. But having said that, so at VMA Group, we do have regional consultants. So I would connect with both Mark Muscroft and Julie Matsey, it's Mazzei. So they recruit for the southwest regions and the northern regions respectively, and they do recruit contractors as well as permanent employees. Um, but it's a fair point to what you're saying. Obviously, my experience is London based and working across the south. Um, Targeting regional interim roles, everything I've seen is based in London. I think it's just mapping out, like maybe you would do it in the permanent search as well, mapping out those clients, those end clients, companies that are in your region. Um, and so if you're in the southwest regions, for example, so you might want to map out all the big employers, whether it's Bristol Airport, University of Bristol, Imperial, Spark Sarco, or whatever it may be, and then approaching those guys. If they've got talent acquisition teams, they may have people that focus on interim management within those businesses, and approaching your senior comms bods there to let them know that you're in the area, you're available for contracting, and you feel like you could add a lot to the organisation. That's probably what I would do from a more of a regional perspective, just map out the clients. What do you think, Nadine?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's going to be definitely contacting recruitment agents who are based in that region and know the region well. That's another good way. And direct, I think, yeah, direct with organisations, really, really honing in on that and having that short list and contacting them direct as well, seeing what opportunities are there. I'm, looking and based in London, so I must admit, and don't have that sort of regional expertise, but I think that's how I would approach it if I was going.
Awesome. Thank you. How flexible are, this is a question from Rebecca, how flexible are employers on location and remote working for these types of roles? So it kind of links into my answer earlier. I think it does depend on the project, the role you're going into. If it is a global program, they are still remote roles for sure. So not as many. I've got a call coming in. Not ideal during a webinar. There are still remote roles if it's in a global function. And there's more flexibility with contract roles compared to perm, as I mentioned. It depends on the employer. I know employers such as Shell, for example. I know quite a lot of contractors there over the past 12 months have pretty much been fully remote. So it's just finding the right end client and the one with that flexible working program. Nadine, what do you think on that?
Yeah, touching in on my own experience, I haven't had any remote roles. Certainly they've been hybrid. But in terms of remote, no, I haven't had that in my experience. It's just been remote. Sorry, hybrid.
Question here from Nola. Can you apply for a full-time role and then negotiate 4 day a week? Yes, in my experience, you can definitely do that. That's happened quite a few times. Again, not always the case, but it's case by case basis. Some clients, some hiring managers are definitely open to that. If you get in front of them and show them your worth and what you can bring to the table, then they may be a bit more flexible. So I wouldn't. I would still apply for those full-time roles if you are looking for 4 days a week. Where can I find outside I-35 contract roles? Beverly. Wow, isn't that the $1 million question?
I'll leave
What a
that one to
golden
you,
nugget.
for you to answer, Matt, I think.
Goodness gracious. I wish I had the answer. I ask myself every day, Beverly, how I could find those outside I-35 contract roles for everybody that I know is in the market. It's tough at the moment because the majority of day rate roles are inside I-35. That's true, particularly for the global corporates who would have a kind of blanket policy. They just do not engage with limited company contractors. So from my experience, and this is hard to know if you're in the market, and it's hard to know for me before speaking with the client, but the clients, the kind of medium-sized businesses, sometimes smaller businesses, are the ones that are sometimes more open to carrying out an I-35 assessment because they don't have a blanket approach and they do see the value in it, and that they're able to attract the best talent, the best contractors in the market. They do gain a competitive advantage if they are willing to carry out an assessment. But it's the big global corporates that tend to not engage with limited company contractors. So that's what I would probably say to that. I don't know, Nadine, if you think anything different.
Yeah, I mean, most of my interim roles have been in financial services, and there has been generally a blanket no roles outside IR35. But then when I speak to some of my friends who work in different industries, retail, pharmaceutical, they are getting those roles that are outside IR35. So I think it's really industry led. Is what I would say. I haven't seen any in the industry in which I mainly operate, which is financial services, but I do think in other sectors that there are opportunities there.
Definitely, definitely. Do you have to work through it, or do you have to operate as a limited company if a role is outside IR35? That's a question from Sarah. Um, you don't. You don't have to at all. You can still work through an umbrella company, but you wouldn't receive the financial reward, or the increased remuneration. Um, so typically, if a role is outside IR35, then some contractors would want to work for a limited company. The only reason you may not is if I guess that the increased kind of bureaucracy of putting it all together, the time, the tax returns, getting an accountant, setting up your insurance and things like that. I can see why that may be a bit of a pain, but hopefully it's worth doing. But no, you don't legally have to operate for a limited company. So a question here from Jerry. You haven't mentioned that as contractors, we don't have to worry too much about the politics in the organisation. That's a very good point, Jerry. Nadine, do you see this as a benefit?
I think you still do because you're part of the organisation. So that is still there. I think, you won't escape that. And you still have to sort of manage that and navigate your way around it. But I suppose it's slightly different because you're there for an interim period, whereas if you're in a permanent role, you may be there for longer. But I don't think it completely disappears. It's just managing it.
Absolutely. That's what in our survey. We're starting to sound a bit like Family Fortunes here. Our survey says, but in our recent survey, that was still one of the benefits there of going into contracting. The lack of that sitting in a central comms team, I guess, and having the politics. But as Nadine says, I guess it's there to some extent. I missed a question actually earlier from Nadine, so apologies, Nadine. Different Nadine, obviously. How do you deal with scrutiny of interims in terms of cost saving? So it's linked, I guess, to essentially trying to get a client to hire an interim, even though they may see it as a high cost. I'm kind of thinking on that one. And I think it's with regards to firstly conveying to the client that it isn't necessarily hugely more expensive than hiring a senior level permanent resource because of the all of the extra employee benefits that they don't need to pay for. So they are still saving on 13.8% employers NI. They're still saving on all the extra pension contributions and bonus and share and everything like that. So it's not always financially a huge expense compared to a permie, but also showing the added value that someone's like Nadine or a lot of the people on the call here can bring with their increased diverse experience that maybe people in permanent capacity couldn't bring. So that's how I would convey to a client that it's worthwhile considering an interim hire. But I don't know, Nadine, what do you think? So, did you read that the same way?
Yeah, no, in terms of the cost element, I must admit I haven't got involved in that element of it, but certainly why I am asked to come in and my expertise is that because I offer something very different to what they already have in-house. My expertise is broad. I've worked for many different companies, and therefore I'm coming on to do a defined project for a defined time. So for me, that is the value add that I'm able to bring.
Brilliant, perfect. Agreed. I appreciate we've been on the call now for an hour, so we probably should wrap up. Really, we've got a few more questions, but I can maybe ask one more question, Nadine, just as we come to the hour. I know everyone kind of has to, crack on with things. There's this question here. I'll try and pronounce the name, Sidamisil. Sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly. What skills should I highlight when applying to change communications roles as an external communications professional, hoping to make the change? Oh, and you've ended it with Sid. Okay, I should have gone with Sid. Nadine, what do you think to that? How can Sid, transition maybe from an external comms specialist into a change comms?
Into change comms. So I think they're going to be looking for any projects that you may have worked on, because change is essentially that something is taking place which is changing within the organisation. So from external, maybe some of the crisis comms that you've worked on, maybe highlight that and your role in there. That would be my key point. How you've worked with stakeholders, both internally and externally. I think you can shape that to around that sort of change comms piece as well. How you worked with the team as well. That's another element as well that I'd probably bring out. I think it would be all the sort of the key skills that you have for your role, but make highlighting them and focus them around any change pieces. So the crisis comes from an external point of view is the first thing that sticks out for me. Must admit, it's been a long time since I've done external. It's all been internal and change. So it's got me thinking there, which is always great. But yeah, I'd focus it around the crisis comms.
Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, agreed on that point. Perfect. Well, as I said, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Nadine. It does take quite a bit of time to put these things together. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, expertise, and wisdom with us, and the communications professionals today. We will be sharing the recording on our YouTube channel probably next week. And again, thank you to everyone joining today. I know it's a lovely day outside, deceptively cold, but lovely and sunny. But yeah, thank you for joining. I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to the next session. Should have mentioned earlier, in our May session is with regards to AI in comms. So we'll be sharing some information on that in the next few weeks.
Thank you.